What is your goal in a video game? Recently I was playing Genshin Impact, and I do play that game quite a lot in my off time, which is why you may occasionally see videos here. And I got into a discussion regarding what the end goal of Genshin is, and then I compared that game to something like Blue Archive, to Arknights, to a lot of other Gacha games. To clarify this, I mean, what are you progressing towards? I think in all of us, we like to have a sense of progression, whether that be feeling like our account is getting stronger or feeling like we're working towards something significant. The end goal of something like the Soulsborne series or Elden Ring is just to beat all bosses and reach the ending. Regardless of which ending you choose, everything you do is in service to that goal. Getting a new weapon, upgrading stuff, killing enemies to get souls, to increase your level, to increase your stats, to wield better weapons, to use spells, etc. Everything is in service to that. But if we're talking about Gacha games, goals can be very roughly defined. If you're talking about Blue Archive, you can have multiple facets of goals. You can either want to complete the story, in which case you can, but that is vaguely tied to your account progression. You can want to reach the higher levels in PvP, or even in the extreme factor of raids, which requires pushing your account to the limits, which requires doing missions, getting credits, getting XP, getting a bunch of other materials to level up your characters. Ultimately, everything you do in Blue Archive is in service to one goal or another, whether you want to have the strongest account and rank the highest and the most content, or whether you want to just clear the story. For me personally, I want the story and I like my characters, specifically Azuna, and for example, anything I do in reference to Azuna or anything I do in reference to clearing harder content is in service to that goal. Either I'm unlocking more story tidbits or I'm increasing Azuna's level, which further improves my favorite character. Therefore, it encourages me to play the game and encourages me to push my account to the limit. But in Genshin Impact, there is no goal. And this is not to say that the goal is find your sibling or anything like that. What I mean is, what are you actively doing? Finding your sibling isn't exactly a goal because nothing you're doing is achieving that. You only get a quest once every 3 or so months that really affects that goal. And ultimately, we know that goal is at the end of the game. And even if your goal was to just find and meet your sibling, you did that already. So we're not counting that goal as the goal of you. That's the goal of the game. That is the end point. If we're talking about Abyss, well, many individuals be that. So the question remains, what is your goal? Ultimately, you can say your goal is to have the strongest account, but because there's no leaderboard, there's no PvP, there's no Abyss ranking system, there's no boss kill times. Ultimately, you can't really prove that you have the hardest hitting account or the strongest account because you can't feel like you're progressing. As much as you may want to farm artifacts and get all these perfect characters, that is a self-focused goal. That is a goal you put in place and a goal or challenge you made for yourself in order to give you something to work towards. But even then, it's nothing concrete. So what I'm referring to when I say goal is something you actively work towards. What pushes you to play the game more? What pushes you to perform better? What pushes you to continue doing things that are mundane, such as artifact or talent level farming or leveling up units? Because ultimately, if you can clear the hardest content in the game, i.e. Abyss or the weekly bosses, then there's nothing for you to actively work towards. Why not just quit the game where you are, come back in 3 months, do an event if you want to, pull for a character if you want to, and that's it. Now, a lot of individuals say Genshin Impact needs an endgame, and it does, don't get me wrong. This Power of the Abyss isn't exactly endgame anymore. It was when the game first released. But then the question remains, what would be endgame? And I'm not talking about maybe a domain you can clear once a week. At that point, the might as well just make Abyss reset. I'm talking about what is your end goal. And for individuals who are going to say Genshin Impact is a casual game that's not meant to be played all the time, that's fine. But other gacha games have a goal. In Arknights, building up your characters and building up your units allows you to clear extremely difficult content. And the difficult content changes pretty regularly, and you have the events which bring in more difficult content pretty regularly. At the end of the day, even if you play Arknights for months, you won't have an account that's strong enough to clear most content with relative ease. Genshin Impact, all you need is a couple characters, maybe 8 characters fully built out, and you can clear all the content in general without really having to switch up your teams. So it's not necessarily saying that Genshin needs to be the special one, the special, amazing, unique gacha game. It's saying that Genshin needs to perform at the level of other gachas that arguably don't have the popularity or revenue that it does. If there is no goal in my game, what am I working towards? I'm working towards a stronger account, but for who? For why? What is the point? If I'm the only one who's seeing it, if I'm the only one who's actively doing this, if I don't have any way to compare myself to want to improve other than making my own goals and making my own goal posts and moving that objectively, then there is no point. Even with all of that said, there is no guaranteed level up or count progression moments. The only guarantee you theoretically have is talent domains, weapon materials. That's it, because even if you're utilizing the character's ascension mat, they don't really do much other than allow you to level up talents, unless you're working within a Nemo unit who requires higher levels for elemental mastery and swirl. So in that instance, you can't continue moving a goalpost because that's just you doing it. There's nothing for you to actively look towards and say, I want to do that. If Survival Abyss had a floor 20, which is just a boss rush in which you fight Ashtaha and perhaps Raiden at the exact same time, and it's incredibly difficult, then hey, everything you do is in service to pushing your account past that point. If there is content like floor 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, or even up to 18, in which the content got harder and harder and harder to the extent to where it wasn't just annoying enemies, it was spongy enemies, it was reaction-based enemies, enemies in which you had overload being applied to you, or enemy or count, or even obstacles wherein it locked off you or Inazuma characters, or your Liyue characters, or polearms or bows. It would force you to build other units. There was a sense, a progression. There was everything you were doing was in service to a goal that is no longer there anymore, because you can beat floor 12 most likely. And if you can't, you still have one goal left, but realistically, how prevalent is that goal? We have so many different arenas. Thousand Winds Temple in Mondstadt, you have the Abyss or the domain from the Zhao quest line. You have multiple little areas in which you can battle in that aren't currently utilized, and I think they should be. I think if you were to expand Genshin Impact, and let's say hypothetically you add in those domains or those little boss arenas that I talked about, the Thousand Winds Temple and Mondstadt, you should make us be able to farm character experience and Mora from there. That way our resin goes to artifacts and talent domains, because as more characters release, especially Dendro, we're going to need a lot more of these materials to level them up. And if you're gating people by resin, specifically just in regards to the character ascension mats, more specifically the XP, then what you're doing is essentially not enticing us to pull units, because we know we're going to have to wait 8 years to level them up. So if we could farm XP and Mora, that'd be fine. And if you kept world's bosses and everything else locked behind resin, that doesn't change much. But hey, that's just my own personal opinion. With Wuthering Waves and Sumeru and Zenless Zone Zero and all these other gacha games, I think if Genshin Impact does not define its actual goal or give us any content or something to push for, a lot of people will probably quit after Sino, after Dendro, because ultimately, why continue playing a game if you aren't going to work and strive towards something? Because ultimately, the Archon quests are just that quest that you finish once and that's it. Even if you love a character, then you don't get to experience much. It's not like we gain new interactions with them. It's not like once you reach your highest point, your character suddenly changes their combat style or unlocks the ability to use 2 weapons. It's still the same character you had at level 1. The only difference is they can survive more and deal more damage, but your enemies take more damage, so you're at the exact same point as you were with level 1 units. Hitting bigger numbers can only get you so far, and I want Genshin to succeed. I love this game. It did succeed, but I wanted it to continue because I love the characters, I like the gameplay, and ultimately I want this game to be something that I can always come to. But that's just my opinion, and I understand you can have a different one, and if you do, that's perfectly fine. But tell me in the comment section down below, what do you think your goal should be in Genshin? What is your goal? What is your goal in other games? What do you define as a goal in a game? Either way, if you enjoyed, subscribe, consider leaving a like on the video, and I'll see you next time.